If you're of a certain generation, there are few pieces of popular culture in the late 2000s that gained more traction than High School Musical. And if you were a baseball fan like me, the best song of the entire trilogy was I Don't Dance from the second movie because, duh, it was the baseball song. That being said, Bet on It was a pretty close second. But what made this song really cool to me at the time, and what's still really cool about it to me now, is that in addition to the scene from the movie, Major League Baseball and Disney collaborated on a music video that featured players of the day. And combined with the YouTube video's 480 quality and 5:4 aspect ratio, this video is a time capsule to my childhood. And of all the players to make cameos in that video, there's only one guy who's still playing, and that man would be Justin Verlander. This movie came out in 2007. 2007! And over the last two-ish decades, Verlander has done everything there is to do on a major league field. 3 Cy Young Awards, 2 World Series titles, an MVP, so on and so forth. And when it's all said and done, he'll have a plaque in Cooperstown. But for all his credentials, Verlander finds himself at a pivotal point in his duel against Father Time. He's coming off the worst season of his career, one where he dealt with a couple injuries, and more importantly, when the Giants line up on that third base line at Great American Ballpark on March 27th, he'll be 42 years young. And unless Rich Hill sneaks his way onto a Major League Opening Day roster, Verlander will be the oldest active player in the sport. Verlander's passion for pitching still burns bright. As Verlander said during his introductory press conference,
"Passion's still there, the fire's still burning."
So ahead of his 20th Major League season, let's dive into what we might be able to expect from one Justin Verlander. The overall numbers for Verlander last season weren't pretty. He made 17 starts, tossed 90 1/3 innings, and had a 5.48 ERA. Verlander's expected ERA of 3.78 and FIP, or fielding independent pitching, of 4.78 suggests that he may have underperformed a bit, but regardless of how you slice it, by Verlander's standards, it wasn't a great year. But Verlander's poor performance in 2024 wasn't just a case of him being over the hill. Verlander missed the start of last season due to right shoulder inflammation, but upon returning, he looked like his old self. Over his first 8 starts, Verlander had a 3.26 ERA over 47 innings with 44 strikeouts. And in his last start in May, Verlander allowed 1 run across 7 innings with 9 strikeouts. His strikeouts were a bit down relative to his career average, but 41-year-old Justin Verlander was still shoving. Then the calendar flipped over to June, and things went real sideways real quick. He allowed 4 runs over 5 innings to the Cardinals on June 3rd, then allowed 4 more runs over 5 more innings to the Angels on June 9th. Verlander wasn't right, and the Astros would soon after place him on the injured list with neck discomfort. Verlander wouldn't return until late August, but still, he just wasn't right. He had an 8.10 ERA over 7 starts upon returning, including an outing on September 8th, where he allowed 8 runs over 3 innings to the Diamondbacks. He wasn't allowing a ton of walks or homers and likely may have had a little batted ball misfortune, but the real sign of alarm was his 6.2 strikeouts per 9 inning because, for comparison, his career average is an even 9 per 9 innings. Verlander told Astros reporters last season that he may have come back from the injury too quickly. Verlander recently discussed the injuries he dealt with last season and what he's done to manage them. Here's Verlander talking about the adjustment he made to ensure his shoulder health.
Where I'm at now, I've changed a lot of my off-season program. I have, for the first time in my career, I've not put down a ball. I kept throwing all off-season, and that was to help the shoulder issue that I had, and it was totally avoidable. It was my fault. I've always been somebody who just I set down the ball and don't pick it up again for a few months, and then I've always been very lucky that I just pick it up and start throwing. Well, at 41, that caught up with me. So that was an adjustment that I've made that I feel like is paying big dividends already.
Regarding the neck injury, Verlander shared that he was unaware that the neck had even been an issue for years until an unspecified event finally occurred in 2024. Verlander compared dealing with the neck issue last year to when he had to deal with the core issue in 2014, and he hopes that by properly addressing it this time around, it's able to put him on a healthier path going forward. So have we cracked the code already? Will a full offseason to get healthy mean that we'll see more vintage Verlander? Well, we have to go a little deeper than that. One of my favorite baseball-related videos on YouTube comes from my guy Foolish Baseball, also known as Foolish Bailey, titled Justin Verlander's Impossible Inning. Shout out to my guy Fabian as well. The video chronicled a single inning from the 2012 season when Verlander, on the cusp of losing despite throwing a complete game, completely emptied the tank against Cleveland, firing triple-digit fastball after triple-digit fastball. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend doing so.
Wouldn't want to be Cabrera right now. That's why. See you later.
Oh my goodness.
I bring up this video to say that Verlander's four-seam fastball has been an elite pitch for his entire career, and shocker, shocker, we've got some numbers to prove it. Run value is a stat on Baseball Savant that attempts to answer one simple question: how valuable is an individual pitch? And according to Run Value, Verlander's four-seam fastball has been his best pitch by a wide margin. Since 2017, the first year that this stat was tracked, Verlander's four-seam fastball has consistently been one of the best pitches in baseball. In 2017, Verlander's four-seam fastball had a run value of 32. The next season, it was 35. For context, in 2024, Cade Smith of the Guardians had the most valuable pitch in baseball by run value, a four-seam fastball at 28. And we don't need advanced numbers to prove the excellence of Verlander's four-seam fastball either. From 2017 to 2023, opponents had a batting average in the low 200s against the pitch, the lowest mark being 194 in 2022, the same year that Verlander won his third Cy Young. And honestly, with this pitch in particular, the eye test works just fine too.
102!
But in the same way that last season was the worst of Verlander's career, it was also the worst that his fastball has ever performed by a wide margin. Last season, he had a run value of -10 with his four-seam fastball. Again, the same pitch that was once one of the best in baseball. Opponents teed off against Verlander's fastball, posting a .299 batting average with a .497 slugging percentage, which, if you need a comparison,
High drive into deep right field.
Will Clark had a career .303 batting average and a .497 slugging percentage. Part of the reason why Verlander's fastball underperformed last year is pretty simple. Since 2016, Verlander averaged at least 94 miles an hour on his fastball, and, as we previously discussed, he can turn it up when necessary. But last season, Verlander's average fastball velocity was 93.5 miles an hour, the second lowest of his career. And along with the velocity, the spin rate on Verlander's fastball was the lowest of his career as well, which has been part of a 3-year downward trend. For those who aren't familiar with why spin rate is important, basically all you need to know for this context is that fastballs create backspin, and the higher your spin rate, the more a ball fights off gravity and the less that ball drops, which is how a 92 mile an hour fastball with a high spin rate could potentially be more effective than a 96 mile an hour fastball with a low spin rate. That being said, a high velocity, low spin four-seam fastball can still be effective. The average spin rate on a four-seam fastball varies from year to year, but it's roughly in the range of 2100 to 2200 RPMs, or revolutions per minute. In his prime, Verlander routinely averaged at least 2500 RPMs, and in 2018, Verlander's first full season with the Astros, he peaked as high as 2600 RPMs. Combine that with a mid to high 90s fastball and you've got an elite pitch. But after dipping down to the 2400 range in 2022 and 2023, Verlander was down to 2395 RPMs last season. Less spin and less velocity obviously aren't great, but those dips may have been due in part to the aforementioned injuries. And during spring training, I'll be very curious to see if those numbers dip even further, if they maintain, or if he sees a slight uptick. And even with those dips, there's still a path for Verlander to be a great pitcher in 2025. Lance Brozdowski recently put out a video and outlined some tweaks that Verlander can make to his arsenal, and I highly recommend checking out that video as well. And while Verlander's spin and velocity were both down, he can still spin it better than most pitchers in the league. Stuff Plus is a recently developed stat, shout out to my guy, Saris, that takes a look at the physical characteristics of a pitch such as the aforementioned spin rate, velocity, vertical movement, horizontal movement, etc. And it gives us a number to contextualize how much better or worse that pitch is compared to average. Last season, Verlander's fastball had a 116 Fastball Plus rating, which would have ranked 5th if he qualified, and in fact, looking at his whole arsenal, Verlander had a Stuff Plus rating of 117, which again would have ranked 5th if he qualified. Stuff isn't everything, but it sure isn't nothing. I am very aware that I use a lot of stats in both my videos and articles.
Alright, I get it!
But you don't need me to bombard you with numbers for you to know that Oracle Park isn't exactly a great place for hitters. Just ask Brandon Belt, who hit a baseball 426 feet at this ballpark and didn't end up with a home run. Or ask Joe Panic, who did the exact same thing at this exact same ballpark and also didn't end up with a home run. Both of these clips would have been homers at literally any other ballpark, but not here. Oracle Park is nothing short of a pitcher's paradise, especially for someone like Justin Verlander. In the Willy Adames breakdown I did a couple weeks ago, which you should totally check out if you haven't already, I noted how the Giants pitching staff has a knack for inducing ground balls, and that since 2021, no team has had a higher ground ball rate than this team. Verlander, on the other hand, is a fly ball pitcher. He has a career fly ball rate of 42.3%, which would have ranked 13th in all of baseball last season, and since returning from Tommy John in 2022, Verlander's fly ball rate is up to 46.1%. Despite allowing so many fly balls, few of them ever leave the ballpark. Verlander has a career home run to fly ball ratio of 9% even, which, since 2000, ranks him in the top 20 among all qualified pitchers over the last 25 years. And if you want to prevent homers, Oracle Park is the place to be.
Taylor, plenty of room in that part of the ballpark. And near the warning track, one away.
If we go back over to Baseball Savant, we'll find a stat called park factors, which helps give us an idea of whether a ballpark is more hitter-friendly or pitcher-friendly. And when it comes to home runs in particular, good luck at Oracle Park. Verlander will also have the benefit of an outfield that should perform better defensively next season. Last year, San Francisco's outfielders ranked 27th in defensive runs saved with -16. And that poor defensive showing was due in part to Jung-Hoo Lee suffering a season-ending left shoulder injury in May, leaving the Giants to patch together the center field position. With Lee limited to just 37 games, the Giants ended up using 9 total players in center field last season. Elliot Ramos ended up taking on the bulk of the center field responsibilities, and while he ended up becoming the Giants' first homegrown all-star outfielder since Chili Davis, Ramos was worth -15 defensive runs saved in center field. In left field, by comparison, he was worth 4 defensive runs saved, with 1 out above average. Lee projects to be roughly an average defender in center field. Fangraphs gave him a 55 on the 20/80 scale with his fielding tool, but an average defender is a lot better than what the Giants got last season. With Lee back in center field, Elliot Ramos back in his more natural position of left field, and Mike Yastrzemski, who was a Gold Glove finalist last season, in right field, the Giants should be able to have, at the minimum, a solid defense for Verlander. Finally, we arrive at the most important question of them all. What can the Giants realistically expect out of a 42-year-old Justin Verlander? I could give you some numbers from a projection model and we can call it a day, but where's the fun in that? First, let's take a look at the history. According to StatHead, there have been 86 separate seasons in league history of a pitcher who's at least 42, starting at least 10 games. It's a list that includes 16 Hall of Famers in Cy Young, Randy Johnson, Early Wynn, Joe Williams, Dazzy Vance, Don Sutton, Warren Spahn, Nolan Ryan, Grover Alexander, Steve Carlton, Red Faber, Gaylord Perry, Eperixy, and the Big Three in Glavine, Maddox, and Schmaltz. This list also includes guys that have had really accomplished major league careers such as Bartolo, Rich Hill, Kenny Rogers, Jamie Moyer, and David Wells. And there's also the matter of Roger Clemens, which that's a can of worms we're not going to open up. Basically, if you've spent more than 4 decades on this planet and a team is willing to give you opportunities to consistently start, it means you're probably one of the better pitchers to ever play the game. But how did these guys perform? Over those 86 seasons, these guys had on average a 9-9 record with a 4.24 ERA over 152 innings with 87 strikeouts. And honestly, aside from those strikeouts, this is pretty in the ballpark of what Verlander's season could look like. Steamer projects Verlander to have a 7-8 record with a 4.25 ERA over 130 innings with 110 strikeouts. Verlander joins a rotation that will have Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, and himself as the locks, with Kyle Harrison and Jordan Hicks as the favorites to land the last 2 spots, but with Hayden Birdsong, Landon Rupp, Mason Black, and Keaton Winn in the mix as well. And given the state of the NL West, especially with what the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks did, the Giants will need Verlander to produce if they want any chance of fighting for a spot in the playoffs. But when it comes to Verlander, let's also focus on the bigger picture. Verlander is currently sitting on 262 career wins, and given how the game's evolved, he very well might be the last pitcher who has a shot at 300 wins for quite some time, maybe ever. Verlander has said that he wants to pitch until he's 45, and to get to 300, that'll require him winning about 10 games a year over the next 4 seasons. Impossible? No. Difficult? Absolutely. Like I said in the beginning, Verlander made it abundantly clear that the fire to compete is still burning bright. But how long will that flame still be lit? Will this season kick off the latest chapter in Verlander's already Hall of Fame career? Or could we potentially be watching the final season of one of the greatest pitchers to ever play the game? Time, as always, will tell. Thanks for watching.